The moment I stood on the desolate hilltop, the wind whipping my hair around my face and the grave markers stretching out before me like silent, skeletal fingers, I knew that everything I had ever loved and every promise I had ever made was a lie built on sand. My so-called fiancé, Edgar, was waiting for me back at the house, completely oblivious to the fact that I had just spent the last hour staring into the face of my past, into the eyes of the man who was both my soulmate and my tormentor. I was supposed to be planning my wedding, selecting china patterns, and walking down a sensible, safe path, but instead I was consumed by a raw, burning need for a wild, destructive love I had sworn to give up. The core of my entire existence had been ripped open, and the scandalous truth of my real feelings, the ones I'd buried alive a decade ago, was about to erupt and destroy 2 entire families. I need to know, before I even tell you the whole story, was I wrong for feeling that my love for Heathcliff superseded my duty to everyone else, even if it meant utter devastation for everyone involved? Tell me honestly if you would have chosen the same path of ruinous passion over quiet, suffocating peace. It all began, or perhaps it truly began, when I was a child living in the wild, untamed beauty of Wuthering Heights. My name is Catherine Earnshaw, and that house, perched atop the bleak moors, was a mirror of my own spirit, passionate, unpredictable, and always on the verge of a storm. My father, old Mr. Earnshaw, was a good but often weary man who, on a trip to Liverpool, brought back a silent, dirty, dark-haired foundling boy. He named him Heathcliff. From the moment Heathcliff stepped across the threshold, my brother Hindley hated him with a venomous intensity that only grew more bitter over time. But for me, he was a revelation. We were the same, Heathcliff and I, 2 halves of a single, tempestuous whole. We were inseparable. We spent our days running wild across the moors, the wind and rain our only witnesses, our feet sinking into the soggy earth, laughing at the adult world and its ridiculous rules. The house belonged to Hindley, but the moors belonged to us. We spoke without words, understood each other's deepest fears and wildest dreams with a look. He was dark and passionate, I was bright and willful, and together we were a force of nature. I can still remember the sound of his voice, low and rough, calling my name when the mist rolled in. It was the sound of home. This perfect, wild freedom was violently interrupted when my father died. Hindley, who had been away at college, returned with a new wife, a delicate, timid woman named Frances, and took his place as the master of Wuthering Heights. His first and most satisfying act as master was to relegate Heathcliff to the status of a servant, stripping him of his education and reducing him to a common laborer. I watched helpless as the boy I loved, the boy who was my equal in every way, was beaten, humiliated, and systematically destroyed by my jealous brother. The cruelty of it was a searing pain in my heart, a guilt that never truly left me. I was forced to maintain a cruel distance from him, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, youthful fear of Hindley's wrath. I was still allowed my place at the table, my soft clothes, and my books. Heathcliff was given a meagre crust and a cold attic. The injustice of it all was suffocating. Then, one evening, pure, unadulterated curiosity led Heathcliff and me to peek through the grand windows of Thrushcross Grange, the elegant home of the wealthy Linton family, nestled in the green valley below. It was a world of silks, chandeliers, and quiet, polished manners, everything Wuthering Heights was not. We were caught, and while Heathcliff managed to escape, I was bitten by their bulldog and forced to stay, injured, for 5 blissful weeks of recovery, and, more importantly, education. Mrs. Linton took me in hand, transforming me from a wild, running child into a proper young lady. When I returned to Wuthering Heights, I was wearing silk stockings and fine shoes. I was a different Catherine, poised and proper, and for the first time I looked at Heathcliff, still rugged and unpolished, and felt a flicker of shame. That was the moment the poison entered our bond. I had seen a way out of the bleakness, a path to social elevation, and it was paved with the gold of the Linton family. Edgar Linton, with his pale, aristocratic features and his gentle, unwavering devotion, was the embodiment of this new life. He offered me stability, wealth, and the social standing I craved. He was the perfect, safe harbor. But my soul was a storm-tossed sea, and only Heathcliff could truly navigate it. One night I confided in our old housekeeper, Nellie Dean, a conversation that Heathcliff, unbeknownst to me, overheard. I told Nellie that I had accepted Edgar's proposal. When she asked me why, if I loved Heathcliff, I would marry Edgar, I uttered the most infamous and self-destructive words of my life. I said, my great miseries in this world have been Heathcliff's miseries, and I watched and wept with him all through his degradation. He shall never know how I love him, and that, not because he's handsome, Nellie, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And then came the dreadful, fatal qualification. But I've no business marrying Heathcliff. It would degrade me. I told her I loved him, not because he was poor, but that marrying him would make me poor and socially insignificant. I felt a fleeting sense of superiority over him, which was the cruelest irony, since he was the only thing I truly valued. Heathcliff, hearing only the word degrade, vanished that very night into the darkness of the moors, taking my heart and soul with him. I searched for days, my voice hoarse from calling his name into the relentless wind. The guilt was a physical agony, a crushing weight in my chest. He was gone, and the world was instantly drained of color, life, and meaning. Eventually, I married Edgar Linton. Thrushcross Grange became my prison, albeit a gilded one. For 3 miserable, hollow years, I played the part of the respectable Mrs. Linton, trying to convince myself that comfort was a worthy substitute for passion. Edgar was kind, devoted, and gentle, but his love was a pale, cool light compared to the bonfire that was Heathcliff. Then, 3 years into my marriage, Heathcliff returned. He walked into my drawing-room, a shadow in the afternoon light, but transformed. He was no longer the ragged stable-boy. He was tall, refined, wealthy, and carried himself with a quiet, dangerous authority. The change was shocking, his new-found fortune a complete mystery, but his eyes were the same dark, burning, and full of an ancient, unforgiving love. The moment I saw him, the veneer of my respectable life shattered, the air crackled between us. Edgar, my placid, proper husband, looked like a ghost next to this man of fire. Heathcliff was back, and he hadn't just come for me. He had come for revenge, a slow, agonizing campaign against every person who had ever wronged him. Starting with the 2 families I was now connected to, his presence was an immediate and total disruption. He rented Wuthering Heights from my now widowed, gambling, addicted brother, Hindley, using him to fund his own slow demise. He started a toxic, cynical courtship with Isabella Linton, Edgar's younger sister, solely as a tool to torture Edgar and keep himself close to me. I tried to keep the peace, to reconcile the 2 impossibilities of my life, my husband and my soulmate, but their hatred was too great, and my own divided heart too fragile. I loved Edgar because he loved me, and because he was a good, true man, but I loved Heathcliff because he was me. The tension in the Grange became unbearable, leading to the infamous confrontation in the parlour. Edgar, in a rare burst of spirit, ordered Heathcliff out of the house, forbidding him to ever return. Heathcliff simply looked at me, his eyes full of a heartbroken contempt. I stood between them, driven mad by the stress, the endless, agonizing conflict tearing my very mind in 2. I yelled, I screamed, I physically threw myself down, manipulating them with the weapon I knew best, my own hysteria. The result was a profound, self-inflicted mental and physical breakdown. I locked myself in my room, refusing to eat, hoping the drama would force them to reconcile, or perhaps simply wishing to die and escape the choice. So that's the horrific, soul-crushing situation I was in. My health was failing rapidly, my mind was fractured, and I was caught between a life of quiet, unfulfilled duty and a passion that promised madness and destruction. I was literally dying, caught in the crossfire of my own two loves. Heathcliff was still roaming the moors, an elegant savage, plotting his revenge against the world. Edgar was downstairs, heartbroken and terrified, trying to nurse me back to health, knowing my fevered ravings were all about another man. Before I tell you what happened next, the final, devastating act of this tragedy, I want you to pause right here. Look at the 3 years of hollow marriage, the decade of separation, and the fact that I was dying from a broken heart. What would you have done? Would you have held on to your dignity and your marriage, or would you have thrown it all away for one final, desperate moment with the person who was truly your other half, knowing it would kill you? Both comment below what you would have done in my shoes. The fever and the starvation weakened me to the point of no return. I lay in bed, my mind drifting in and out of lucidity, but one need remained crystal clear. I had to see Heathcliff one last time. Nellie, driven by her own desperate love for me and a fear of what my death might do to both men, broke her promise to Edgar and sent word to Heathcliff. He crept into my room late one night. The sight of him, his face etched with 3 years of agony and a terrible, self-imposed restraint, was almost too much for me. I was a ghost already, my strength almost gone, but the passion between us was a living, breathing, violent thing. He rushed to me, holding me so tight I feared my fragile ribs would break, but I didn't care. The reality of him, the feel of his arms, was all that mattered. I didn't hold back. I accused him of abandoning me, of killing me with his absence. You have killed me, and for that agony as well as yours, the curse of the murderer, which is a never-ending torment, be on you. I cried out. His response was a torrent of raw, heartbroken rage. He blamed me for my weakness, for my hypocrisy, for the choice that separated us. Why did you betray your own heart, Cathy? He demanded, his voice a broken whisper. You loved me, what right had you to leave me? Because I was degraded, because you chose the superficial luxury of the Linton name over the reality of our shared soul. He told me he forgave me for the pain I inflicted on him, but he could never forgive me for the pain I inflicted on myself, by sacrificing my true nature. We held each other, locked in a final, frantic embrace, a desperate attempt to meld our two separate, doomed bodies back into the one single soul we knew we were. The sheer, overwhelming power of our love, a love that was both beautiful and utterly corrosive, was exhausting. Just as our moment was coming to its fever pitch, Edgar returned home from church. Heathcliff, with a final, searing kiss, placed my body gently back onto the bed. He pressed my hand to his heart and whispered a promise not of life, but of unending connection. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. He then vanished into the night, leaving me with a look of agony that I knew would haunt him forever. A few hours later, in the early hours of the morning, I died, giving birth prematurely to my daughter, Catherine, who was fragile, but survived. My last breath was a whispered, desperate prayer for Heathcliff to join me, or for me to join him, in the wild, open freedom of the moors, far away from the stifling constraints of the Grange. Edgar was devastated, but even in his profound grief, his essential goodness shone through. He buried me not in the Linton family vault, but in a corner of the churchyard overlooking the bleak, beautiful moors I loved. He understood that my spirit belonged not in the refined tombs of the gentry, but in the wild earth with my soulmate. The aftermath was a slow-motion tragedy, a chain reaction of sorrow and revenge. Heathcliff, driven to utter madness by my death, became a phantom of rage. He bribed the gravedigger to promise that when he died, he would be buried next to me, ensuring that even in death our dust would mingle. He haunted my grave, begging my ghost to come to him, tormenting himself with the hope of seeing me. He followed through with his terrible revenge. He tormented Isabella, who escaped him only to die years later, leaving him with their sickly son, Linton Heathcliff. He completely ruined Hindley, inheriting Wuthering Heights and ensuring Hindley's son, Hareton, was raised as an illiterate, common labourer, a cruel mirror of his own past degradation. The final generation of the story revolved around the children, my daughter, young Cathy, and the two boys, Linton and Hareton. Heathcliff, in his final, chilling act of cruelty, manipulated young Cathy into marrying his sick, selfish son, Linton, ensuring that upon Linton's inevitable death, he would inherit Thrushcross Grange as well, thereby consolidating both estates and completing his revenge on the Earnshaw and Linton families. It was a wicked, masterfully executed plan, but in the end it was too much for even his granite heart. Watching the young, vibrant, wilful Cathy struggle against his darkness, seeing the budding, fierce love between her and the humbled, uneducated Hareton, a love that reminded him so fiercely of our own lost youth, began to break him. He lost the will to live, driven not by a desire for death, but by an overwhelming, insatiable longing for me. He stopped eating, his mind slipping into a state where he only saw my face, heard my voice, and felt my presence. He died soon after, found in my old bedroom at Wuthering Heights, drenched by the rain, with the window wide open, his face fixed with a grim, wild smile, as if he had finally welcomed the ghost he had been calling for so long. He was buried exactly as he wished, next to me, on the windy hill, his head pointing toward mine. And what became of the survivors? The two young souls, Cathy and Hareton, the daughter of the storm and the boy of the earth, married and left the cursed Wuthering Heights to go and live in the quiet elegance of Thrushcross Grange.